Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and as always, I am joined by the Todd McShay to my Mel Kiper Jr., or is it the other way around? It doesn't even matter. 2019 NFL Draft is in the books. Our special show begins right now with my co-pilot, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's up, Brian?
It absolutely 100% does matter. I am not Mel Kiper.
Anybody but. Okay, I'll give you Bucky Brooks then.
No, that may be no. I can stay Todd McShay. I'm fine with being McShay. Don't make me Bucky Brooks. Don't make me Mel Kiper. In fact, keep me off the ESPN crew.
Okay, that's somewhat fair. I mean, it's not like they had it any more right than we did with a lot of these picks, anyways. So, but you know what? I'm going to sound probably uncharacteristic here. The 2019 draft for the Steelers, they went in with 10 picks. They somehow gave one away. They gave another away next year to move up. It cost too much. They reached for this wide receiver. They get this corner that fell because they don't know how to evaluate him. He'll probably suck anyways. What's the deal with this running back that they got? Why do they need another running back there and then a Jesse James clone? Maybe worse. And then, geez, oh man, what do you need? People on the defensive line or another linebacker, or the offensive line, or what is this other guy that's from this northern Illinois? I mean, is that even like a football team? I think isn't that the way it's supposed to go? I think some people wanted us to be negative and be like, well, this whole thing sucks. Don't look for the playoffs this year, let alone any type of Super Bowl contender here. Just wasting away Ben Roethlisberger's years and everything else. Nah, you know what? I'm mostly pleased with the way this draft panned out, and I think you made a good comment off the air in that there's a realistic chance that a lot of these guys end up contributing or being some type of role players, if not only this season, but in the near future.
Yeah, look, I am slightly amazed and will remain so that they actually picked 9 guys, even though, as the professor pointed out to me, the Steelers do have a history of taking a large number of draft picks, 8 or 9 guys, and have for several years. But nonetheless, I'm still surprised they took this many guys. This provides a lot of new, young blood to the team. But, that being said, am I a little disappointed that they didn't make more moves than the first one? Yes, but I also am tempering that with a pragmatic it takes 2 to tango. We've been saying it all along. You want pragmatism, there's some pragmatism. You can try and make moves all you want, but if you can't find somebody to make a move with, you can't make the move. And I have no doubt that they tried to move up. I have no doubt that they tried to move around, that they tried to maybe get different guys. But if you can't get the deal done, you can't get the deal done. And it has nothing to do with, their inability to make a good deal. They obviously made a good deal with the Broncos. It has to do with if somebody is trying to hold you over a barrel and you don't choose to participate that way. That being said, man, there's some really good picks in this group of guys. There is some reason to be excited. Are there guys I'm less than thrilled with? Yeah, maybe. But there's some nice picks.
I mean, come on. Everybody wants to be like, hey, all you're doing is, kissing butt or brown nosing with the Steelers organization or whatever. There's nothing to be brown nosing over. But at the same time, you don't have to be a jerk about these young men who are every one of these young men are thrilled to be an NFL player and thrilled to be a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. And you're going to have the same optimism that they have. The reason they're selected, be it round 1 through round 7, is that they're among the best of the best. And of course, then teams decide or try and gamble or risk. I should say gamble. I think gamble's a better word for this, on who's the better players at these positions over others. And sometimes you get it wrong, as in the case of the Tom Brady's of the world or the Antonio Browns of the world, or even for the sake of like a Chris Harris or a Tony Romo that don't even get drafted. So this is just the way the way of the world, and there's no reason to be like negative. And a lot of people want us to say this, that, or the other thing. Some of these young men, they're probably not. They may or may not make the roster. You look over a history of a period of however many years, and we were doing this. I think we got through at least 2 draft classes. If half of these guys stick for anything beyond 2-3 years, that's a successful NFL career. If they end up contributing in any way, especially when you start getting into the later rounds, and how can you be super excited? How are you going to talk up some of the picks that you end up getting on day 3 when it's the back end of the draft? I mean, it's the back end of the draft for a reason versus first round. You're not going to get 3 first round picks, and even if you get 2 or 3 first round picks, how does that work out for the teams that have had those in the past? I.e. the Cleveland Browns, as a good example, taking a lot of first-round picks. So, I mean, it's, these are things for one reason or another. Some of this stuff doesn't end up working out, whether it's a first-round pick all the way down to the 7th round. Now they're in the NFL. Now they get the battle. By the way, undrafted as well. Talk about some guys. Mike Hilton. How about your left tackle, Pro Bowl left tackle, Alejandro Villanueva? There's Ramon Foster. There's a number of examples like that just on the Steelers alone. I'd be remiss to leave out Roosevelt Nix from that as well, also making a Pro Bowl. So, I mean, the draft is kind of like a feeling out process, and it's a way to allot players to teams in order to make the weaker teams stronger is the idea. That's the reason that they end up drafting higher. And then the teams that end up building their rosters, like the Steelers, they try and, everybody's just trying to build their best team and put their best team on the football field, be it in free agency, be it in the draft. And I think the Steelers have had a pretty good offseason in doing so. And, I don't want to spend too much time on the first 2-day picks, but just to go through real quick, Devin Bush was anyone who was a Steelers fan should have had this guy penciled in as the guy they wanted. They got him. That's a win. That's a victory. They don't have a round 2 pick. We talked about bouncing back around, maybe not getting some guys that we would have liked, and reasons therefore for that. You don't have a second round pick. You go to the 3rd round, and you get a guy like Deontay Johnson, not Deontay Thompson, and not the CFL player they signed earlier in the year, Deontay Spencer. There's a lot of Deontays to go around. By the way, Deontay Thompson was a safety from Alabama. I was drawing the blank on that big time last night, and I guess where did he go? The Cardinals, I think, maybe. But somebody had leaked that he has like a degenerative knee issue or something, and that's why he fell so far in the draft.
Right.
So we were screwing up Deontay Johnson's name, the wide receiver from Toledo that the Steelers got, and it gets leaked even though he's taken in the top of the 3rd round, that the Steelers had him as high as a first-round grade, and that surprises all of draft Twitter, because draft Twitter, much like fans of things such as, pro wrestling, Star Wars, comic book movies, you can never make them happy. And it seems like everybody on Twitter sometimes just likes to be negative and unhappy. And that's the reason why I said the things I said there in jest, is because, come on, enjoy this. Enjoy this like these guys, these kids I call them kids, of course. They're in their 20s. It's just because they're younger than me. They're young men entering the NFL, so they are kids. They're moving from being a big fish in the pond of the NCAA and college football. Now they're a small fish once again. So don't read too much into that. It's not, don't be the Kevin Colbert, Ben Roethlisberger analogy here. But these young men, they're excited. They're here. They're in the NFL. So, there's no reason to be like, because it wasn't the guy that you necessarily wanted or thought that the Steelers would take. So what if you're wrong? I'm rooting for Deontay Johnson. I looked at his film. I read up some more on him now that he's the official guy. And, that's a pretty exciting pick now that I look at it. It looks like it's a playmaker. We talked about Justin Lane, a cornerback from Michigan State, taken in the 3rd round as well. And that's somebody that we actually did have, on some of our boards and maybe paid attention to a little more. He's a bigger corner, and we were really excited about. And some of these other young men that were added here on day 3 we're also excited about, regardless of whether or not we ended up. A few of them we did point out in recent episodes. So I don't know. What's your kind of wrap on the first 2 days here, Brian, before we jump into the day 3 picks?
Look, I look at the first 2 days as solid, and in fact, in some ways, beyond solid. The fact that they got Bush is a victory for them, and the more you think about what they actually gave up to get him, it was a good deal. The Broncos felt like they got a haul, but I also feel like the Steelers got plenty of value to move up and get Devin Bush. If you're not excited about that pick, then I don't know what to tell you, because there's nothing in this draft that was going to turn you on. That was a big deal. Deontay Johnson, as I stopped to make sure I got it right this time.
No.
Like I said last night, when we did our second round day, look at the guy's highlight tape. Once you look at his highlight tape, you will get an understanding of what they see in this kid. And the comparisons to Antonio Brown and Emmanuel Sanders are not, while you don't want to put that kind of pressure on a kid, but you understand he has those kinds of traits. Will he have Antonio Brown's work ethic? Is he going to take jugs balls constantly? Is he going to be the first guy on the field and the last guy off the field? I don't know. But he certainly has skill set that equates to what Antonio Brown's skill set was coming out of college. It's a pick that you can be excited about if you want to. It's also a pick you can get, you can be a negative Nelly about, because you didn't know anything about the kid going in, and you hear he's from Toledo, and you're like, ugh. That's just dependent on your personality, I guess. But if you want to be negative about it, go ahead. I think you are doing yourself and this kid a disservice. Do some due diligence and go look at what he offers. And at minimum, you should be giving the Steelers a pass because of their history in drafting wide receivers. They clearly have a knack for it. And then the same thing is true of Justin Lane. Even though you want to complain that the Steelers don't know how to draft, not you particularly, of course, Joe, but people want to complain that they don't know how to draft cornerbacks. This is a guy that most people thought was a much higher value pick than where he ended up going. And why he dropped, who knows? It's just the way things go at times. I'm excited about the Justin Lane pick. I was excited last night. I continue to be excited about Justin Lane. I think he comes into a great situation in that room where he is not going to be pressured into starting right away. I still think he can contribute immediately. I'm very happy with the first 2 days of this draft, probably more so than I thought I was going to be overall.
You said something that's pretty important there, higher than thought. And we were talking about all of the draft experts and everything. How many first round picks are there, Brian? 32, right? There's 32 NFL teams.
Yeah. No, there's 98.
That's what I was getting at. It almost seems like, there's maybe I don't know the exact number of this year's draft. Was there like 250 picks? Hold on, I'm gonna pull it up for certain here. 254 this year. Mr. Irrelevant being number 254, and it's one of those things where, okay, you're not going to know all 254 of those picks off the top of your head unless you're a complete draft geek nerd, and that kind of happens too. But the thing is here, how do I want to phrase this? Higher than a lot of people think players are going to go higher than expected. Mack Wilson went fifth round to the Cleveland Browns, sixth round.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people were thinking he could be a first round pick with the Steelers. We pointed that out yesterday. Many other players falling into that type of category. So when you look at someone like Justin Lane, or even when they were talking about Deontay Johnson being maybe a first round grade, to get him in the third, to get Justin Lane maybe a potential second rounder late in the third, and that kind of wraps on where a lot of these players that they end up getting in this draft, because it's like, well, we mocked this guy in the fifth round instead of the fourth round. We'll be talking about that guy in just a second. But there's a lot of picks within here where it's like, oh, this here's somebody that fell through here, and it's really tough because you have your superstars, you have your big players, you have the first round, and the first round is huge. You probably know everybody, you've probably seen them, you watch college football games, you know their names, you know who they are, and then the guys who aren't part of that 32, there's usually like a dozen or so, maybe up to 2 dozen, depending on how much talent there is in a particular year, and that makes round 2 and or 3 very exciting. Oh, where's this player going to go? Like a Drew Lock, for example. Where's he going to end up? And then all of a sudden you end up on the day 3, and they have any random person announcing the picks, and some of they don't even have highlights for some of the people that they end up. You don't even know that some of the talking heads on TV even know who the players are that are getting picked sometimes. And, I look at it this way. We talked about a couple of the past drafts, and we were giving it, grades individually to the players and then overall. And we usually say, what? If you get at least one starter, if you get two, you're probably getting an A. Or if that one starter is a Pro Bowler, because I made the comment not too long ago. It was the 2012 draft, and I said I absolutely hated it. I think it was one of the worst drafts that the Steelers have had, at least in a decade, if not longer. And you said, no way, you absolutely love it, because at the very top, they ended up getting David DeCastro, who is an elite player. So when you look at it in those type of terms, if every other pick that's here, all the other 9 or 8 of the 9 end up being a wash other than Devin Bush, does it really matter if Devin Bush ends up being an all-pro and an elite player? No, I don't think it does.
No, and look, every draft can't be the 74 draft. Every draft is not going to produce 4 Hall of Fame players. It doesn't work that way. You're lucky if you come out of any one of these crapshoots that we call the draft with, a Pro Bowler. If you do, consider yourself a winner, because there's just as much chance that you get a Ryan Leaf, in the first round as there is that you get, I don't know, a Tom Brady in the 6th or an Antonio Brown in the 6th. You don't know what you're going to end up with any place along the line, because no matter what they've shown in college, there's a huge transition between the pros and college, and you're depending to a large extent on projection. So how good your scouts project, and then how much that player really wants to play. How much are they willing to do to work? Which I'm going to talk about big time with one of the draft picks that they took, today. But you can't know that until you get them into the system. And so all of these guys, because it's 255 players out of how many thousands of football players across the country managed to get drafted. These are the elite of the elite. But even that grouping, it's questionable whether they're all going to make it.
Yeah, exactly. And you also have, each of the NFL rosters at 90 right now get trimmed to 53 and then 10 practice squad spots. And you look at some rosters, you have teams that are in transition. They fire everybody. They fire their, front office, they fire their coaching staffs, they fire, they clean the slate with a bunch of players, they trade them, they get rid of. I mean, look at the Cardinals. They were trying to rebuild last year, got rid of their coach already, got rid of the quarterback they took in the first round last year, and have already replaced both with new individuals this year. So they're always gambling. You have a team like the Steelers that are very stable in that regard, and a lot of people criticize and they say, well, they'll never fire this person or fire that person. Well, they went through a lot of change. They got rid of Peasy. They added Terrell Austin. They've made some moves in the coaching staff, and now they're making moves with some of the players. And we can finally get into some of the day 3 picks here. And it starts off with a guy that we ended up mentioning the day before as a potential target. We mentioned the position of running back was a potential target, and it ends up being Benny Snell from Kentucky. I think we may have even mentioned his name specifically, because I can't remember if it was a pre-draft visit or not. I think that's where that came up. But it was somebody that we were eyeballing, and some people were like, "Oh, I had him in round 5 or I had him in round 6." Well, you know what? I don't know. Maybe the Steelers didn't want to risk that, and you don't know. You don't ever know. I mentioned this as a hypothetical. If the Steelers don't move up to 10 to take Devin Bush, who do they take at 20? And it's just like, I don't know. Did they take Greedy Williams, a guy who fell to the middle of the second round that the whole bunch of other teams passed on? 5 or 6 other corners went ahead of him, or like who did they take? Noah Fant, the other Iowa tight end? I really don't know. You don't have an answer for that, and we'll never know. It's hypothetical. So in the same way, you can't say that Benny Snell, well, he would have been there next round. Now it's hypothetical. You just don't know, and you also don't know that with other teams. You don't know what their needs are, and you don't know that if other players that they were looking at end up getting taken off of their boards, that now they don't get redirected and start looking at Benny Snell as well.
Yeah, this is just another example of a culture. We have a draft culture that has become impacted heavily by draft simulators and by people who, by draft Twitter. And draft simulators are the way most of us will do a mock draft. because it's easier to let the computer pick for all the other teams. But the problem with that is the simulators are only as good as the algorithms that they're programmed into them. And I don't think I did a single simulation where Benny Snell didn't fall to me in the 7th or the 6th round. But that's because it's a simulation, and those simulators do not have the data that these NFL teams do. Benny Snell is, first of all, let me state, I'm really happy with the pick of Benny Snell. I think he's a tough guy. I think he is a Steelers running back type. I think he's going to be a really good complement in the room. I don't agree that he's going to eventually take James Conner's job and become a starting all-pro running back. But I think he is an absolute guy who can contribute. He's strong, he's tough, he runs with power, but he's not that fast and he's not that shifty. But I think he will bowl some people over, and that is a guy they don't currently necessarily have. So I'm really happy with the pick. And, look, when you start to get into these lower rounds, 4th to the 7th, the 4th and the 5th, little higher quality player. When you get to the 6th and the 7th, you're kind of really projecting. It doesn't surprise me that they took Snell. We said they were going to take a running back. This seems like a good place to have done it. Some people wanted him to take somebody else, but this is the guy they wanted. And again, if this is the guy they want, why not let him take him?
We were talking about the running back position specifically as one where they wanted to add some depth. And there are quite a few of we'll just call it the draft Twitter that loved Benny Snell. And I guess, he's one of the few guys, 3 seasons over 1,000 yards and a dozen touchdowns or 10 touchdowns or whatever. There was some one of these crazy statistics where only he and Herschel Walker are these SEC running backs that share the same statistics. And it's like, well, if we just drafted Herschel Walker, great. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone's looking for Benny Snell to come in, and I don't think anybody wants to replace James Conner, and I think that would be foolish to say so. But even with Jalen Samuels, I think Jalen Samuels is a heck of a talent. I just think he's a different type of player, and I think that's where Benny Snell comes in too. Benny Snell could be, dare we say, like a mini bus or a bus too? Definitely none of that Gus the Bus crap that was going on in Baltimore. That was absolutely terrible. I never want to hear that again in my life. We might not have to. Yeah. They ended up taking who Justice Hill, and then they still have Mark Ingram. So they're doing what they're doing. So anyway, Benny Snell is someone that I say automatically give him 26, so we could forget about Bell. And as Derek said over in the back rooms, he could take and rub out the B and add an S and an N maybe, or get it restitched so then the jersey says Snell instead of Bell. I like that. 4.66 40. I mean, that's pretty cool with me. 5'10", 224. This guy's compact, and he's somebody that he's talented, and what do you want to say, like north-south, downhill type guy? But here's the big thing. He breaks a lot of tackles, and that's a huge, huge deal. And I know some of the knocks on him are, whether he can protect in pass or breakaway speed. We heard that with James Conner too. I don't think that's necessarily, we're not looking for Snell. Once again, most of these draft picks are depth, and these are spot starters if there's an injury or something else that happens, or to give someone a breather on the sidelines. And I think we'll see Snell. We won't see a lot of Snell. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin and these guys, Randy Fichtner kind of did the same exact thing as his predecessor, Todd Haley, and that's not use a lot of running backs. Until James Conner got hurt, you didn't see Jalen Samuels. You didn't see Stephen Ridley, very, very rarely. And in years past, it was always Bell. You saw Bell, you didn't see Conner. You saw Bell, you didn't see D'Angelo Williams unless there was a suspension or an injury. And then when you did, you saw that D'Angelo Williams was good. You saw that James Conner is good. You saw that Jalen Samuels is good. And I think you'll see Benny Snell is good as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that he's not coming in to take James Conner's position. He's coming in to be a complementary back, to provide a different look than what they have in place. It's been shown very conclusively that a running back by committee can work. But James Conner as a Pro Bowl player is still going to probably carry the bulk of the load. But this is to keep some of the wear and tear off of the treads, so to speak, elongate his career, and provide the Steelers with enough dynamic looks at running back that they can do different things. So I really like the pick. I'm happy with this pick. I know, like I said, some people are going to think, oh, this is too high because every time I mocked him, he was available, later. But that's the point. Those are just imaginary algorithms that are making stuff up, and there's no way to tell until the real draft comes. And if this is where they had him slotted and he's there, then that's where you take it.
Yeah, everybody had Greedy in the first round, and everybody, was saying Darnell Savage would be there in the third in some cases, and that changed rather quickly, and nobody knew who Rock Ya-Sin was until 24 hours before the draft. And so the Steelers, let's see, we said that some of the positions they needed. The next pick was a position of need because there wasn't a whole lot of depth there, but you've got a guy behind Vance McDonald and Xavier Grimble that at least has some starting experience. We didn't think he would make the roster this year just because of the fumble in Denver. We thought it was very costly maybe to his career. Maybe bygones are bygones. I don't know. But the Steelers go and they grab another guy from that university up north, Zach Gentry. And he's a massive human being as well. Like 6'8". I think I said 276 or 265 or something like that. I think 265. 265. He's basically a Jesse James clone. So Jesse James is out of there. You get at least hope that Gentry's a better blocker. And I don't expect a whole lot of majorly athletic moves, breaking tackles, yards after the catch, anything like that. But if he could be a possession guy, and it sounds like he's the type of capable receiver who can shake linebackers and safeties. What they say, he's a seam route runner.
Seam buster. He is a seam buster.
Yeah, that was the quote. Seam buster. Hey, good. This is something they could use, but I don't know. Yet again, you got a 5th round pick. Probably going to project to be a tight end 3 and maybe not see a whole lot of the field unless, Grimble or whatever be the case. Grimble stinks it up or somebody gets hurt ahead of him. Knocking on wood. So, I'm gonna gloss right over to the other 6th round pick as well, and we'll just package them together. Defensive tackle also fitting a need because there is a spot on the roster open with the departure of L.T. Walton, who was not retained or brought back. Isaiah Buggs from Alabama, and the Bugs must have been in the ear of Steelers brass from one Carl Dunbar, who was formerly a defensive line coach and definitely coached Bugs at the University of Alabama, and now the Steelers defensive line coach. And you know what Bugs looks like to me is maybe a Javon Hargrave type style player, and he also comps to Tyson Alualu. So and he also is capable as a pass rush, more of a pass rusher than I think we saw from L.T. Walton. So here's a guy that can definitely be part of a rotation given some seasoning and experience.
Yeah, I want to talk about Zach Gentry because I said I was going to talk about a player that you're looking at projections when you pick him. Zach Gentry is a project. Zach Gentry was brought into that team up north as a quarterback and converted to tight end. And as you may or may not have seen in the back rooms, the one thing that is true about him is I won't use the professor's exact quote, but he's soft. And let's just put it that way. He's soft. If you look at his NFL profile, the top 4 weaknesses all have to do with strength. Needs more upper body development. Play strength is below par. Doesn't have drive power for double teams, and has doesn't do great on his sustain because of his balance and his narrow base. All that being said, this is a 6'8" target who can be a seam buster. This is not the next Gronk, okay? But in order for him to contribute, they've got to get him in the weight room and get him some strength. They've got to essentially beef him up a little bit, not necessarily in weight, but in muscle, because he is a soft guy. And other than that, though, there's a lot of upside to him. But that's what happens when you get down to the 5th and 6th rounds. You're looking at the positive traits, and then you try and figure out, can I fix the negative traits? And strength is something you can fix. But this is what I was talking about earlier. What they can't know for sure, and what you only think you learn in interviews and process, is what's the heart of this guy. In other words, when they say to him, you got to get stronger, is he going to bust his butt to get stronger? He either is or he isn't. And that's within that person and that individual. And if he doesn't have it in him, then this will end up being a pick that we look back on and say didn't work out. But if he has the drive to succeed, if he wants to get stronger, if he wants to do better, this is a guy with a lot of upside. So I don't hate the Zach Gentry pick. I just want it to be clear, this is not the guy that's going to come in and necessarily be, out of the gates, a guy that's just going to take you all over the place just because he happens to be tall. There's some work that needs to be done there. But I think that it can be done. It's all stuff that can be fixed. So,
yeah, I mean, some of it takes coaching at the next level. So you don't know if somebody could do something at the next level until they maybe get the coaching, and that's just the way of the world. And the Steelers, they let go of Bucky Hodges as a tight end. They brought in Kevin Rader, who was one of my guys' alma mater, Youngstown State, has one of the biggest highlight reel one-arm catch on literally hugging a defender and catching a ball against his back to send his team to the national championship game a couple years ago. Look that one up. He's there. I don't anticipate him maybe doing much more than being a camp body. Practice squad player with Christian Scotland Williamson. He was the European transfer student, so to speak, last year as well. And also a gentleman that was on injured reserve that was retained, usually not like injury settlement waiver type deal, but actually on injured reserve, Jake McGee. And you got to think they like who McGee is as well, as they kept him around. Isaiah Buggs, I don't think much more needs said. If he's a special teamer,
it does.
Oh, yeah. Well,
there's an important thing about Isaiah Buggs that needs to be said.
Say it.
It's very critical. His nickname is Big Pooh. And that's Pooh as in Winnie the, not as in Baby Pooh.
Very nice.
And anybody whose nickname is Big Pooh, I'm in on, man. He's in.
Yeah. I don't know. Just as long as, as long as he's not soft. I mean, we had some things we said where we wanted a bigger mean streak out of Dan McCullers, so hopefully the guy's got the right mentality. Speaking of mentalities and a guy that hits like a truck and plays with the speed of lightning, actually, you get two guys here that are very fast that are added linebackers. Well, one defensive end projects to be an outside linebacker, Sutton Smith from Northern Illinois. I know everybody's saying who, where? Two-time MAC Defensive Player of the Year, two-time All-American, two-time finalist for, it was the Hendricks Award, which is for the top defensive end in the country, and 29 sacks over 2 seasons, leads all of the FBS. Holy cow, where was this guy? 6th round? Are you kidding me? That sounds like something that sounds really good on paper. I know there's all these awards and, people excel at the college ranks, but you have maybe the size might not be there for him necessarily to be outside linebacker. Some people are still saying in the these press conferences and stuff on each of the picks, you have the coaching staff saying maybe he's still an outside linebacker. You have others that are reporting from the media and the beat writers saying he might kick into inside linebacker, but then they go and take an inside linebacker with Ulysses Gilbert from Akron, and it just so happened to be Ulysses S. Grant's birthday. Thanks, ESPN, for that tidbit. 1822 or something. I even remembered that since you're talking numbers and stats. So 2 linebackers in the 6th round. There's going to be some jobs up. I mean, it's some people are going to be competing in camp, that's for sure. Definitely John Bostic, definitely Tyler Matakevich. Those guys are going to have to watch over their shoulder, especially if Sutton also projects to be an inside guy, where Gilbert definitely is.
I don't know how I feel about the Sutton pick about Sutton Smith, in the sense that I there's no questioning the guy's smart. There's no questioning his ability. But whether it translates to the pro level is going to be interesting. His arms are not tremendously long, which was going to make it very tough for him to get off blocks as an edge guy, which is why I think some people may be projecting him to go inside. But he played some inside linebacker, I think, in the Senior Bowl. And, it's just not enough to make a real judgment on because it's probably the first time he's done it. But they ask him to move inside. It's a possibility. Look, I think that's probably a realistic thing, that he could move inside because that's where they need the most depth help. I think you've got Mark Barron, who I think is going to end up translating into being that nickel guy or the dime backer kind of a player, even though that may not be what they said to him when he got signed. But at that point, they didn't know if they were going to be able to get Devin Bush.
Well,
so
hold on.
Do
you think Devin Bush immediately just jumps in as the starter too? I mean, it's happened with players like Shazier.
No.
Edmonds got there because of injury. I don't think he was penciled in initially, nor was TJ Watt. So, so maybe Barron wasn't lied to.
No, I don't think that he's going to become the starter immediately. But if I will say this, if Bush doesn't start to push for that job before the end of the season, then there are concerns with the capital that they spent for him and at the place that they took him, because he should be. And his athleticism and his traits would lead you to believe that he should be. And his personality would lead you to believe he's going to want to push for that position. And I think that's probably accurate, which is why I think Barron is going to eventually transition into that dime backer role. I think to start, he's going to line up with Vince Williams, unless Bush is even better than we think he is and pulls a Ryan Shazier in camp and basically makes a statement that says, this is my bone.
Exactly.
It's not two dogs, one bone. It's one dog, one bone, and it's mine. Get out.
Bury it in the backyard and it's history.
If that's a problem, that's a good problem to have, quite frankly, if that's the way it works. But you nailed it on the head when you said John Bostic is going to have some issues. Tyler Matakevich is going to have some issues because both Sutton and Grant, Sutton Smith, I don't know why. Sutton is a last name to me.
Oh my God. I was going to say that. I was like, should I trust this guy? He has two last names.
Yeah.
You know what
I
we
don't
need
trust
to do?
guys with two first names. He's got two last names. That's even worse.
Well, hold on. You know what? I got to look this up because now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if anyone knows what his middle name is. It's not published here as far as I can see. And his brothers.
He's got three last names. I don't know.
Well,
I have to question the pick.
His brothers are Sean and Shane, so the alliteration's still there, which is kind of cool. But they have first names, so I don't know. Somebody's going to come around and be like, "We named our child Sutton," and I'm like, "Oh boy, bang your head now on against the wall, Brian." We've done it now.
I'm sorry. I'm not saying it's not a first name. I'm sure it's a very good name. It feels like a last name to me, and that's why I keep calling him Sutton rather than Smith. Because it just feels that way. But anyway.
Well, we know him on a first name a last name basis.
He's our buddy. He's our pal. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast. Who knows? But the thing about Smith and Ulysses Gilbert is they are going to push to be backups. And Ulysses Gilbert is the kind of guy that I actually think could eventually push Vince Williams and make a play to be a starter in the league. I think he's got that kind of talent. I really, really love that pick, especially where they got him. So, it's going to be interesting in camp. I think there's a very good chance, even though Dirty Red is a core special teamer and has done fantastic work at special teams, that linebacker room is going to get real competitive, and it's going to be real quick.
Speaking of, 14 sacks last year broke the single-season sack record held by Scott Keller in '84 and Larry English tying that in 2006. And he also he led the nation in sacks as a sophomore, and tackles for loss with 14 sacks sophomore year, tackles for loss 29.5. And then quarterback pressures, 73 quarterback pressures as a sophomore. So, he's 2 years removed from that. Of course, he came out of school early. He was a junior. So he announced, he left early foregoing his senior year. So, you're only as an extra season removed from that. I know the last pick is kind of near and dear to your heart because it's an offensive lineman. I really didn't think they were going to go tackle. I really thought maybe guard center, but looking at the way things fell, they get a massive, massive human being in Derwin Gray out of Maryland. And I had Derwin's stats up here, and I already lost it, so let me pull this right back up. But 7th round pick, early in the 7th round. This guy is a guy that is maybe not the most mobile for his size, 6'4", 320, but he can he's kind of the opposite of what you would think. Instead of being a good run blocker, or so I'm seeing here, is pass protection seems to be his forte. However, the Steelers don't need this guy to, knock their socks off right away. This is more or less they're filling a spot where they've invested in the past. Okay, they got Chucks last year with the higher pick. Gerald Hawkins has been snake bitten and hurt. If Gerald Hawkins is snake bitten and hurt again, he's going to be out of the NFL. They need somebody to fill in there. Matt Filer, pencil him into the spot where Marcus Gilbert was, because that's where he was playing last year. You have to assume he's going to stay there. We've talked and discussed whether or not he might be more natural as a guard or move over in there, but they still have B.J. Finney, who's a backup center and a guard, and backs up either DeCastro or Ramon Foster. So you have to think that Filer more or less has the inside track. He's gonna. If he doesn't have the inside track, he will at least get some competition, probably from Chucks, I would think. I don't know that Gerald Hawkins even has the track to compete for a starting right tackle job. And then Derwin Gray, this is a gentleman that, I don't know. I mean, maybe he could make the roster. We mentioned that there might be a spot there. We didn't think there were very many roster spots open, but as you start to look at some of this, there's going to be a few people that are going to get bumped off. The Steelers took an extra wide receiver. They're loaded there. They've kept 6 in the past couple of years, and they still have 6 that are solid there. And unless I don't see them necessarily, why would they re-sign Eli Rogers just to get rid of him? You know what I mean? Why would they bring in Dante Moncrief just to get rid of him? They're not going to just say goodbye in year 2 to a second-round pick in James Washington. So you got to assume all of those guys are locks. All the quarterbacks are locks. All 3 of the running backs are locks. There's probably a spot on offensive line. You guys also assume that Gentry, who was just drafted, going to be a lock. Looks like the offense, pretty much everyone that was drafted on offense has the opportunity and should make this roster, barring anything catastrophic or just plain boneheaded with their progress. On the defensive side of the ball, it looks to be where it's going to be the Slim Pickens and the Trimmins. And we know where the Trimmins is probably going to be coming in. It's going to be maybe somebody like an Artie Burns. We just mentioned John Bostic. We thought he was maybe going to be even – he didn't have a whole lot of cap savings, but it was talk about cap casualty type stuff. Morgan Burnett was already released, so there's a spot there. So some of these things are going to shift around, and I forgot to look at who's all there for the safeties, and I'm going to look right now. Let's see. Marcus Allen, Jordan Dangerfield, Sean Davis, Terrell Edmonds. Okay, so Nat Burhay was he was on a 1-year deal last year, so he's not someone that's there. You have some guys that were like on a practice squad that have been trying to compete, like a former 7th-round pick, such as Keon Adams, undrafted guy like Ola. These guys are all going to get pushed now. Even Anthony Chickalo, I mean, it's a 2-year deal, so you got to assume he's the most experienced backup they have as an edge rusher, but even his type of spot isn't safe. Maybe for a year, they could easily get out of that for the second year too. So I overall like the draft. I'm not going to poo-poo on this like some people would probably suggest or like to, or I read a lot of filth on the social media there, Brian, as you do too, or the filth finds us, I should say. And it's just like, I don't know if people pay attention to how football works, how the business of this works, how we're building a roster works, how the draft works, or maybe they do pay attention, maybe they don't understand, maybe they just nothing will ever make them happy. But I was very happy happy with Devin Bush. Well, hold on. You know what? You didn't get to say anything about Derwin Gray. Do you have something to say about Mr. Gray? 50 Shades of Gray. Does he have a nickname? 50 Shades of Gray.
I don't like that nickname at all. I didn't like that movie. So, you know what? That's an unfair judgmental call. I didn't see that movie.
Oh.
So,
but you read the books.
I didn't read the books. No, I prefer my smut to be
geez,
pure smut. I don't know. I don't even know what the hell I don't know where I'm going with that. I don't want to read smut. Smut there's no point. Anyway,
just the picture books for Brian.
I don't even remember any that my daughter used to read when she was a kid, but be that as it may,
these aren't the same picture books that we're talking about.
Wait
a minute. Let's pause this for 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. This is not 12 o'clock at midnight, either of the two long draft nights. We are completely well-rested men here that, well, it is a long draft process. Our minds are completely in the gutter, and we're losing it right now. So, but anyways, Brian, continue with something other than picture books. Maybe start with Derwin Gray. I'll try not to call him Mr. Gray anymore and get any thoughts about movie and or book series.
Mr. Derwin Gray, I think because of his body type and how he translates, he's listed on ESPN as a guard when they drafted him, but they announced him as a tackle. But I think there's a good chance he slides inside. The Steelers have I don't want to say an abundance because you can never have too many. And as you said, if Gerald Hawkins continues to be bitten by the injury bug, Gerald Hawkins is going to very quickly find his way out of the league. But if he can stay healthy this year, you've got him, Chooks, Filer. You've got a good core of tackles to try and deal with. And I think that is one of the main reasons that Gray may slide inside and become a guard. I think that will enhance his strengths and limit his liabilities. That being said, this is a strong man. He is big and he is strong.
Dare we say he's a grown-ass man?
He may be. Until he pancakes somebody in a preseason game. I'm not going out on a limb, but he looks like a grown ass man.
Yes,
that is a given. I will tell you this though. Ulysses Grant is a grown ass man.
Yes,
I've seen his tape. He hits like a grown ass man. That is another grown ass man. So we'll see. We'll see how this all translates. Look, how am I going to not like an offensive line pick after I berated them for not saying there was an offensive line run yesterday? The dogs in the trenches are my boys. So, I like that they picked an O lineman. I knew they would eventually. Whether he becomes something or not, I think will be solely dependent on his own desire, and we'll see how good the new O-line coach is, how much he learned from Munchak. I forgot his name. I can't. It's not coming to me right now.
Sean
Surratt. I can't say it half the time either.
I mean, the new offensive line coach that's been there longer than Mike Munchak.
Yes, I know.
The new top dog among the offensive line coaches.
The new top dog, absolutely. The way I look at this draft is I give it. If I'm giving it a grade, I'm going to go probably A- to an A. Because I don't see a lot of real problems in what they chose. I think they hit where they needed to hit. I don't see as many projects in here as sometimes exist in the draft. I picked out the one guy I said I thought was really a project, and that's Zach Gentry. I think the rest of these guys, especially their top three, contribute very quickly. And that is this solid draft. If you can get three contributors in the first year out of a draft, you've done pretty good. And then it depends on how they pan out. Of course, you're never going to really be able to know how good a draft was for 3 or 4 years down the road. But this is a better draft than last year, in my opinion. And I did not expect that coming into this draft based on the class and based on where the Steelers were drafting and what they were going to need and how I thought the draft was going to fall. So I'm really happy with the way the draft panned out overall, even though, there are things I wish had happened differently. But I think that's the case all the time. I can't really berate any of the choices that they made.
I'm going to go AAA plus.
Homer, you big Homer, you.
Call me biased. I don't know why. The Steelers, for all the faults people want to say with the draft, they better get this right. They have a history of screwing up. Kevin Colbert can't do this or that. Let me read you off 2016. At least for a period of time, we thought Artie Burns was going to be okay. Okay, that's your first round pick. Sean Davis doesn't miss any snaps, doesn't have his name called often enough in that secondary where I think he stands out as a problem. And if he were a problem, they would have already tried to replace him or move him or do whatever else. He's played multiple positions. Javon Hargrave, while a reserve guy, seems to be kind of coming on. Hawkins, we said, has been snake bitten. Travis Feeney is out of the league. DeMarcus Ayers was playing in the AAF. Tyler Matakevich, a seventh round pick, still on the roster. Pretty darn good draft. 2017, TJ Watt, Juju, Cam Sutton, James Conner, Josh Dobbs. Yes, and yes. Do I even need to name everyone else? Brian Allen's still hanging around. Colin Hobo was the long snapper. Adios. Keon Adams is one of these practice squad guys I was talking about, an outside linebacker. Last year, okay, this is fair enough on paper, just looking at this, comparing maybe like a Devin Bush, because everybody wanted a linebacker, and they just could not get anywhere to get a linebacker. So they went safety, and they needed safety. Terrell Edmonds is a freak of an athlete. James Washington, both of these guys in camp, whatever we got to see last year as far as, any training or practice or anything like that, they look like stars in the making. Only played as rookies, still cutting their teeth. That's also a full year of football, man. I mean, they go from college, if they play in a bowl game, then they go straight into training and doing the combine and the draft, and now they're going to be going right into all this like little mini camp type stuff and everything like that, and then training camp. These guys don't get a breather. Now they get a little bit of a breather, and look out. And you saw what that did for Juju and TJ. I'm predicting the same for Edmonds and Washington. Mason Rudolph could be the quarterback of the future. We were talking about Chucks as a tackle. Marcus Allen, safety. He got in a little bit last year. Jalen Samuels. This guy is an offensive weapon. I'm looking at this draft the same way, Brian. I mean, every one of these guys, Devin Bush, if Devin Bush ends up starting, okay, right away. Deontay Johnson, this guy gets on the field and starts making his own highlight reel with the Steelers. Sign me up. Justin Lane, we would hope to not have to see him. But if we do see him and we see good. Benny Snell, we hope not to see either, but we tend to think that's going to be okay. Gentry's the project. I think Buggs is kind of a project, but I mean, there's what? He's like the fifth defensive lineman. Let's be realistic. Special teams. Sutton Smith, probably special teams as well. You just never know. You don't know if any kind of rotation is going to be out there, if this guy is going to, open some eyes as a later round pick. You already talked about Gilbert being a hard hitter too. Maybe another guy that's a reserve linebacker, also special teams. And then Derwin Gray, we just kind of went at length with that. There's a real chance that all of these players end up contributing. And when you look over the last few drafts that the Steelers have had, almost all of these players have made the roster, and there's one that maybe doesn't, or one that ends up on a practice squad instead. That's kind of where we're looking at here. I can't say who that might be at this time. Probably one of today's picks would be the most likely target. It usually is. And it just looks to me like there's no reason to really complain about any of this. You might want to say that, well, they took somebody earlier than we had anticipated, but if that's the least of your concerns, at least they didn't wait and missed out on the player. That's usually the worst thing when you're sitting there like, in 2018 and you wanted someone like a Leighton Vander Esch or a Tremaine Edmonds, Terrell's brother, or we pretty much knew Tremaine wasn't going to be the guy because he was the top guy, right? And I'm trying to think, Rashawn Evans was the other one, and the Steelers couldn't move up or make any moves to go there and get that player. Then you feel like you're left holding the bag. And they didn't do that this year, and I think that's going to end up being the real feather in the cap of this draft, provided everything works out most optimistically as you're looking at it. And with several of these picks, there isn't any reason to think otherwise, at least at this point.
Yeah, I was reminded in a message on Twitter today from one of our consistent listeners and commenters, Peter Underwood, whose daughter Adelaide was one of our helmet-worthy winners back in the day. Hi, Adelaide. They live down in Australia, and so that's their member of Black and Gold Down Under. Anyway, he reminded me of something I said yesterday, which was, it's a shame if they're going to draft all these players only to cut them. And I honestly feel like after the picks they actually made today, I got to eat those words because I don't know that these guys are going to get cut. These picks, I think for the most part, all have a chance to stick. And that's a good problem to have. And that's why I said, this could be making problems for guys like Matakevich, for guys like Bostic, for guys like Artie Burns, for some of the guys who have been core special teamers for a long time. Maybe it's time to get some new blood in there and give these young dogs a chance, because that's a lot of what they drafted is that kind of mentality that this is my bone and it's not a joint bone. Wait, that sounds really bad.
I don't even know where you're going. One thing to mention was Mike Tomlin's press conference where they were talking about taking Benny Snell in the 4th. And he simply just said, we didn't overanalyze it. We really liked Benny Snell. And that's all the more you need to say with that. And one other thing is, too, we were talking about maybe some positions of need. And we mentioned safety as maybe being a target. And with 9 picks, they don't end up taking a safety. They double dip on linebackers, which is something we kind of pointed out. We said they'd have to do something with offensive line. No specialist. Probably the only guy that could have been drafted as a punter goes to the Patriots, of course. So, but anyway, Mike Tomlin speaking here says that he's not worried about the Steelers declining to draft a safety because Cam Sutton and Mike Hilton both can play there. So when we're talking about how many players you keep and all the DBs and having 2 DB coaches and everything else right now, they're looking for versatile players that can play in multiple roles in multiple spots. So, I mean, that's a very interesting comment right there to where their mindset already is. Mike Hilton as a safety, or at least – they're going to be a little more flexible with this. We heard that and we saw that last year with training camp. They worked out Cam Sutton as a safety as well. So with the 4 safeties or so that I said that they had already on the roster, they may just roll with that and nothing else. I imagine they bring in maybe some undrafted free agents or look at another veteran that's hanging around out there. But right now, I don't know that that's it's not a major concern. It'll only be a major concern when you're looking ahead into the future and some of the contracts and things like that are going to come up. So, you know what? I don't know. There's not much else I think I have to say about this. I think that they filled out any of the concerns over roster depth, and definitely getting Devin Bush was huge. That's the biggest one that's been the, kind of the black mark, so to speak, on the Steelers ever since Ryan Shazier's injury, and that's been that inside linebacker spot next to Vince Williams, and I think they've addressed that. They addressed the other cornerback spot in free agency, potentially even in this draft, and they may even still have guys such as Sutton, dare I even say Artie Burns turns it around, already on the roster in case Steven Nelson isn't the guy either, but at this point there's no reason to think that way. So I'm very happy with this. We were all panicking when they traded Antonio Brown. He wanted out of town. And we were all thinking, how can the Steelers end up entering 2019 as a better team? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the offseason moves of the Pittsburgh Steelers and their full roster here. And dare I say, with some of the stronger individuals gone, or the more individualistic individuals gone, I believe they're a better team headed into 2019 right now.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, some of us didn't panic.
No, you know what? I didn't.
Some of us weren't that upset about it.
I wasn't panicking either.
I agree with you. I know, but there, and you're right. There were a lot of people out there who were. A lot of talking heads were. But I don't think the Steelers ever were. And quite frankly, one of the podcasts we had very quickly after the Brown trade was, this can be a better team by losing 2 star players. As weird as that sounds, it could happen. And I agree with you. I think this is a better team than it was. We'll have to see how they gel. I wanted to tease something else, because you were hitting about, the perception that they miss more often than they hit in first round draft picks and how bad their drafts all are and whatnot. And as you probably remember from an SCU backroom rant that I did, I got an article coming about that. So, because the perception and the reality are two different things. Mm-hmm. So, the other thing is I was a little, yesterday I talked about the March of Dime contest, and I forgot to do shout outs to a couple people who went ahead and did the donations. Richard Talda, he made a donation. Richard, you're in. Tamara Steelers Girl, one of our Twitter followers. Tamara, you're in. I appreciate you guys making the donations. It's that simple. You make a donation, you get in. Again, we got about a week left before the walk. And once the walk occurs that night, we'll do a Periscope Live on Twitter. We'll draw whoever's going to win the helmet. We'll get the information, and you will end up with a Rod Woodson signed full-size replica helmet. So you've got still some time to make a donation. Take your lunch money for a week. Throw it in this, and maybe you end up with a Steelers helmet. You could pack a lunch for a week or skip. Hey, look, I could skip lunch for a week. I'm sure a lot of us could. Fast for Rod Woodson. That's the fast for Rod Woodson.
Hey, he's my dude. He's probably my favorite Steeler. That's my era, man. That's who I grew up with and looked up to during my childhood. And that was, as much as sometimes I don't want to try and sound like a fanboy, I couldn't be anything but. And I think those players understand that, obviously, too. He was cool with it, so it was good. I had to tell him, hey, man, I looked up to you. You were my guy growing up. The real 26 is what I called him, and he definitely had that smile/wink in his eye when I said that. That was during Bell sitting out and everything. We were already like a month into it. So, but anyways, everyone, thank you for listening to our NFL draft coverage, all of the shows that we just had over the last few days. We'll probably take a couple extra days break from our usual programming, come back around with some of the extra additions with the college free agents and whatnot. Do maybe even another overall evaluation of how everyone fits in, maybe offense and defense, projected starters, things of that nature. So thanks for your support. Thank you for subscribing. And once again, thank you, Brian, for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, as you know, and just remember this. I'm not Mel Kiper.
That's a good thing, because if you were, you wouldn't be on the show.
Yeah,
that would be very interesting, and this is the reason why you don't talk too much smack on some of these guys. Imagine if he did, like, we ever had a guest appearance. How awkward would that be if all we'd ever said was he sucked at his job? So, these guys.
I'd tell him to his face, man. I don't care. That's me. Get off my lawn, Mel Kiper. You stink.
Man, and then we're out of business. So until next time, we may already be with your picture book comments. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.